Hello to you and yours, hoping you're having a great time wherever you may be. This is Dennis Rimmer here, the host of Talking Books and Stuff, and we need your help. We're looking for pledges. We're looking for people to be our patrons. We're looking for a little bit of cash here and there, maybe $5 a month or more if you can afford it, but $5 a month would keep us on the air. And we need you, if possible, to go to patreon.com/talkingbooksandstuff1 and pledge your support. I mean, $5 a month, that's what? 1 cup of coffee, maybe 2 cups, a fast food hamburger or 2, things like that, a couple of newspapers, 1 magazine. So if you can spare $5 a month, maybe a bit more, please help us out. That's patreon.com/talkingbooksandstuff1. And of course, the 1 is the number 1, the numeral, not the word spelled out. Okay, that's patreon.com/talkingbooksandstuff1. If you can pledge your support to help us keep our podcasts coming. We have lots of great guests lined up, lots more to come. So please stay with us. Thank you. And as Diane says, may all the good news be yours.
Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Welcome back. Once again, this is Talking Books, where we talk about books and writing and stuff. And for this version or edition, talking with Spencer Kope. We're in the law offices of my niece Cheryl, who works with a lawyer, so they were kind enough here in downtown Bellingham to lend us the use of their boardroom. So it's probably better acoustics than a coffee shop or the pub across the street where we were going to go earlier. So with us today is Spencer Kope, and he's the author of, among many other things which I didn't know until I started looking him up, Spencer Kope, Collecting the Dead is book number 1 in the series. Whispers of the Dead is the second one, so you can kind of sense that there's a bit of a theme going on here. First of all, though, I will introduce you. I'm Dennis Rimmer, by the way, your host here on Talking Books. Spencer Kope. Spencer, if I can call you that, What is your story? Where'd you start and how'd you end up here in Bellingham and Whatcom County?
Well, I was born in Whatcom County and actually graduated locally. And then I disappeared for about 20 years. I went in the Navy. I was a Russian linguist during the Cold War. Ended up working Intel in Washington, D.C. Finally found my way back here and started working at the sheriff's office as a crime analyst. And I had been writing since the Navy, 30, 35 years. And it wasn't until I started at the sheriff's office that I started tossing around the idea of writing crime novels. And so that's the origin of Collecting the Dead and then the follow-on books.
And we're passing the mic back and forth here. One of these days I'll get myself a mic stand. So Collecting the Dead is the one I was reading earlier. It's book 1 of a series, like Spencer said. The next one, Whispers of the Dead. What's the third one coming up real quick?
It's Shadows of the Dead, and then the fourth one has also been written, and that is... I'm drawing a blank now. Holy cow. Yeah, Echoes of the Dead.
It's got something of the dead in the title.
Well, the titles keep changing, so...
Sorry I took the mic away from him. And we'll set up the audience for us here. It's book 1 of a series was Collecting the Dead, so you can go start looking for that one and then follow on. Magnus Craig is the guy, the lead character, we'll call him, and he has The Shine, and Spencer will have to explain that one for us.
Okay, so Magnus had an incident in his youth that brought on this, it's kind of like a paranormal ability. I mean, people talk about seeing auras around people. Well, this is kind of that on steroids. The interesting thing about shine for him is that he's discovered that it's unique to every person. There's a color, a mix of colors and texture that goes with it. But it gives him the ability as a man tracker to walk onto a crime scene and look around, and he can immediately tell what actions took place there because all the shine is different. So he can see where the killer picked up the knife, where the person was stabbed, any spray, anything like that you typically see at a crime scene. He can see who it all belongs to. He just doesn't know who the shine belongs to. So that's where the story comes in and the whole team concept. He's a member of the special tracking unit. And so the team together, they try to figure out who this shine belongs to. And so it takes him down some interesting roads.
It certainly does, and I've been enthralled, but I don't read very fast, so I haven't got quite to the end of the book yet. But it's set in Bellingham, and the guy, Magnus Craig, they call him Steps. And is there such a thing, an actual FBI special tracking unit?
No. I was looking for something that was not your normal crime novel where it's either detectives or, attorneys and stuff like that. And I thought, it'd be interesting to do one on tracking. But, usually like when we do a track at the sheriff's office, it's you bring the dogs out, they do their part, and then it's over. And that really doesn't make for a good book. So I had to come up with the whole unit and the analysis and all the other stuff, the investigative work that they do along the way.
And he's called Steps because of?
Well, it was a nickname given to him by a search and rescue unit after he went out and found some missing people. And, he always said, everything's just step by step. And because obviously no one else knows that he has this ability, so he has to kind of cover his tracks. And he's learned a lot of real tracking techniques along the way so he can put on a good show. But in reality, he could follow a track in the dark just by following the shine. So, but that's where the nickname came from for a search and rescue unit.
Right. So it's Steps and Magnus Craig. So there's a bit of a Norwegian Scandinavian connection there, I bet. Spencer Kope is our guest. I was just about to say Spencer Craig.
Oh, yeah.
So we're entwined in both of them. And Spencer Kope, our guest, Collecting the Dead, one of his books, Whispers of the Dead, another one. There's more coming. We'll find out more a bit later. Spencer, what makes you smile when you get up in the morning?
Oh, I don't know. If I have something interesting waiting at work, that'll get me going and keep me interested. But it's just all the usual things. I got 3 great daughters and great wife. We've been married now for 30 years. So that's that part of my life. And then the writing is my wife is very understanding. She's after 30 years, she's used to me just disappearing for hours on end up in my study. So it's all that kind of stuff. Sometimes the writing. You talk to writers at conventions and you think you're the only guy that feels certain ways about things, but you'll get writers that absolutely love. I mean, they wake up in the morning and they want to start writing. And then others who absolutely hate the process of writing, but they love coming up with the ideas. So I'm kind of a mixed bag on that. I like coming up with the ideas. Sometimes the writing part can be torturous. Other times when I'm writing, and I know it's working because everything just feels right. You want to keep going. So,
I've got a friend of mine, Jason Schoonover, who we've interviewed previously here on Talking Books. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, by the way, talking with Spencer Kope. And Jason Schoonover was telling me once when he's writing and he's, and it's a magic thing because I don't know how it works. I'm a nonfiction writer. Fiction is beyond my pale. And he says he'll be writing, typing away, bang, bang, bang. And then he'll laugh out loud at something that one of his characters said. Has that happened to you?
Oh yeah. I just finished a book that's not part of this series. It's one I've been working on for a few years. And there are some books that you get emotionally attached to your characters, and bad things happen, and I mean it can really devastate you, you know. And so yeah, I've been there where I've laughed aloud, or you know, I had other I mean just strong emotions about the characters and the story as it progresses. So
That's another facet of fiction writing I don't understand at all, is the characters. It's like you have double and triple and quadruple lives with all these weird things going on in your head. How do you keep it straight?
it does become a problem. With a standalone book, it's great because you don't have to remember it after the book's done. But, you know, working with a series like this, I have to, you know, 5 years later after I write the first one, or I guess it's actually 6 years now, almost, I have to remember all the little details that I put in that first one, because if I get something wrong in book 4, you know, I contradict something from the first book, somebody's going to pick up on it and you're going to hear about it. So, but it's really tough. Yeah, the personalities, especially switching between one and the other and then keeping them all straight. I mean, it takes a lot more double checking and just going through things and making sure you got it right. So I keep a lot of notes.
That was my next question. Do you have files and charts and stuff? And do you do a plot graph?
I do. I actually have I built my own, I didn't have a whiteboard, so I built my own magnetic board on the wall in my study. And it's about 8 feet long, and I pull pictures and I do, you know, chapter cutouts, and I line everything up chronologically. And then I can move things around as I need to, if I need to make adjustments to the story. And you always need to make adjustments. You know, I'll start off in one direction, and by chapter 10, I'll have decided that no, the ending needs to be a little different or something else has changed. So,
So I'm going to get to a point about that in a moment. Just a reminder here, this is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Today we are with Spencer Kope, Collecting the Dead and Whispers of the Dead, the 2 books we have in front of us. There's more on their way, and we'll keep on going here. And I just want to get to a point, because I was just on the way into town. The wifey person was driving. I'm reading, and it's raining, and Steps and his buddy Jimmy are going to their rental car, and it's raining. And then the reason it's raining is because Steps has to take off his magic glasses, and when he does, he sees the shine of the bad guy. So did you figure out that, okay, he's gonna see the bad guy's shine here, so now I have to figure out a way for him to see it? Or how did that, or did it just fall into place?
You know, it's funny how a lot of those just happen. You know, you don't even plan it that way. You know what general direction you're going in, and then you sit down, you start writing, and it just happens. On that particular one, I don't remember how I got there, but it's probably something like that, where I figured, okay, I want them to discover that they've been found out, and that the bad guy now knows that they're after him, and now he, you know, it's kind of a cat and mouse game.
Right.
And so, I mean, what better way to do that than to have this, you know, sudden rainstorm,
right.
And then he's forced to take off his glasses, and then bam, it's right in front of him, and then it kind of goes downhill from there. So,
right. The magic glasses is another part of the story, and you know what? Don't tell me about it. We'll let readers go ahead and read the books, Collecting the Dead and Whispers of the Dead, and any other Spencer Kope books you can find. Then you will find, I call them magic glasses, but they're really not. But in a way, they are. Spencer Kope, is there one book in your life when you look back that's influenced you the most, maybe?
Well, I was a big Tolkien fan when I was younger. I mean, I would read the entire, you know, Lord of the Rings trilogy at least once a year. I love C.S. Lewis. I think the one that actually got me writing, though, was Stephen King. When I first went in the Navy, I was reading his collections of short stories, like Skeleton Crew. And, you know, you're 18, 19 years old and think you can do anything. And I thought, well, you know, this Stephen King guy can write this stuff. I think I can do that too. And so I started writing short stories. And, of course, I look back at them now because I've saved some of this stuff. And I'm just appalled. And I hope they never see the light of day, because I was, you know, I don't know how to write. You know, I'm still learning. And but I go back and I read them, and they're just awful. But the story ideas are still there. I've always had a really good imagination. So I spent, you know, years after that just developing the craft that goes into taking that good idea and turning it into a book where people are going to want to keep turning the pages. So, but yeah, I would say not necessarily one book, but Stephen King, and then the other influences would have been Tolkien.
Gotcha. And people say it's just a page turner. Well, isn't that the idea?
Yeah.
Why does that be a
Either that or
a bad remark, right? Spencer Kope is our guest. We're giggling back and forth here as I just keep this machine going. Talking about Stephen King, he had a book called The Shining, which had sort of some shine in it. Now, is there any of that influence, or is this kind of sprung right from your imagination?
No, and actually the term shine is an actual tracking term. It's what they see on, like if you're walking through a forest or something and you crush a leaf, you'll be able to see that in a certain light. If you look at it from different angles, you'll see that little shine off of the leaf. So it's a legitimate tracking term, and that's where it comes from. So it wasn't later until I thought, oh, wait a minute, people are going to think I'm talking about like The Shining.
Yeah.
So I had that recently happen, the book I mentioned earlier that I just finished. The same thing. One of the characters in there is Margaret. Well, I probably don't want to give that away.
No, don't give it away. But anyway.
But it's a very, very well-known literary name. And I didn't realize it until I was almost done with the book. And then I seriously thought about going back and changing. This is a main character, changing her name throughout the entire book, but I decided I would leave it. So
there you go. We'll look forward for that as well. You said you were writing way back when, but earlier you also told us you were a Russian language specialist. So the Cold War, when it ended, it kind of put you out of work.
Not really. You would think so. There's always something. And with what I did, we were more interested. The work I did with the Office of Naval Intelligence, I was working with Soviet weapon systems, and they're everywhere. I mean, all the third world countries out there have them. And so our interest in that is just keeping up on, who has what the capabilities are. And so that's kind of the arena that I worked in. I started off as a linguist. I went through the Defense Language Institute, and then while I was active duty, and then got out after 4.5 years and went to work for ONI. And then I spent 17 years total. And so I saw, I was there when the Berlin Wall fell, and,
right.
And we actually saw some what we called peace dividends from that collapse, including some of the projects that I ran that were related to stuff that we hadn't seen before. So it was interesting work. So.
Right. Well, actually, the peace dividend thing is what I was going to mention, because that's what happened to Jack Reacher.
Yeah.
In all the Lee Child books, right? He got summarily dismissed, as it were. What's the hardest lesson, if there is one, you had to learn about the writing business as a business?
Well, I guess one of the hard lessons you have to learn is once you get a book out there, you got to develop a thick skin. I mean, my reviews are usually, in the 4 to 5 star range, but I've learned that it doesn't matter. You could write the best book that's ever been seen on the planet, and you're going to get about 5% of the people that just think it's just awful, and they'll tell you about it and they'll post it everywhere. Likewise, you could write the most awful book anyone has ever seen, and you're going to have that same 5 or 10% of people out there that are going to just think it's wonderful. So you're never going to please everybody out there, and you just got to be happy with your own writing and just make sure it's the best you can have. And that's something that a lot of people don't really go in prepared for, because you're not prepared for that public skewering on those rare occasions where you get somebody. And I just tell myself that there's about 2% of the population out there that's completely mental, and I say those are the ones that are giving me the bad reviews. So it's easier to cope with that way. So
there you go. Well, without being irreligious or irreverent, it's like Vancouver Canuck hockey fans. I think I'm a Canucks fan, and they're probably the most vocal and vociferous and argumentative on the planet. And I always say Canuck fans are so bad that if Jesus Christ himself showed up at center ice halfway through a playoff game, they would complain that it took them so long.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking when I'm reading this that this could be a TV series. Is there interest in that area?
Yeah, I actually, my book agent has an associate who's a film agent, and they've been shopping it around. At one point, there was a pilot that was written by one of the production studios, and they actually had a different twist on some of the stuff in the book, and I thought I was going to really object to it, but when I read the pilot, I actually kind of liked it. But then at the time when they were working on that, the head writer decided that it was too much for him, and he couldn't do the full series, because they didn't want just 4 or 5 episodes or just the first season. They wanted him to map out multiple seasons, and it was the first show that he was going to run, and so we ran into hiccup there, and then there were 2 other studios that were looking at it, so it's still in the works. We'll see. My agent keeps reminding me that it took Lee Child 11 books before the first Jack Reacher movie came out, so we'll see.
Right. And then in the end it ended up being with Tom Cruise anyway, but
right.
That's a whole nother story. But no, the series, it has I was visualizing it as I'm reading. I'm going, there's the crusty but benevolent commander, Diane. There's the quirky sidekick, Jimmy, who you guys are at odds, and of course the main character with his special knowledge. There's a airplane and the special unit, so you can go to different locations all over the place, and then the 2 pilot guys are kind of goofy, wisecracking, sort of MASH type characters, I guess. So they're all in there. They could be that. So back to Collecting the Dead, we're with Spencer Kope, and this is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, coming to you live and direct from downtown Bellingham. One of the main character in Collecting the Dead, for instance, is off looking for a special first edition of The Hunt for Red October. Do you do that as a hobby?
I do, actually. And I spent a while trying to find The Hunt for Red October because there were only 5,000 copies originally printed by
the Naval Press.
Right. That was the first fiction that they had ever published.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, and a lot of those books ended up, as you would expect, in the hands of sailors, who didn't, they really take good care of them. So trying to find a good edition is difficult, but I finally found one. Okay. But yeah, I got a bunch of first editions, and as many of them signed as I can. So.
Right. I had a first edition because I used to do this years ago at Seafun Radio in Vancouver, so I set off and got a copy from the Naval Institute, but I don't know what happened to it. Man. I don't know what happened. Do you have a writing routine as such?
Not really. I went for a while there. I would spend enough time. I set a goal of like 500 words a day, and then I found that could be either taxing or limiting, because some days it was
You're
in
on
the flow. Yeah, and I could easily write 1,000, 1,500 words. And so I didn't want to say, okay, I just want to get to my 500 and stop and set that as a goal. Other times trying to get to just 500 words was a struggle. So now what I try to do is just do it in blocks of an hour. And when I'm working on a book seriously, I try to do 2 blocks in the evening. And that means, no Facebook, no internet. Now, for what I do, I spend a lot of time researching things, but during those time slots, I have to make sure that I don't get distracted by all the flashy little ads wanting me to read about, the whale that got beached someplace or some other story.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's probably the bane of a lot of would-be writers is there's so many distractions online, and you spend all your time doing that rather than, what you should be. So yeah, I try to limit it, and then I try to do it in those set chunks of time, and that seems to help.
That's good. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff with Spencer Kope today. We have Collecting the Dead in front of us, Whispers of the Dead. There's more on the way, but you have other books out there, and you had other published works long before these happened. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, just small press stuff. One was it originated as a short story that I wrote, and it just kind of it took on a life of its own, and I turned it into a novel that got picked up by a small press in Virginia. Didn't really go anywhere because the press was too small and too new. But it's a very esoteric book, kind of I don't even know what to compare it to, but it's like an adventure where all the characters are based on human traits and emotions. And it was the original short story was trying to show what was going on inside someone's head with all the emotions competing with each other. So you have, esteem and love and hate and anger and, all these other things. So it actually turned out to be a pretty interesting little book. And then I wrote, my father-in-law is big into the Civil War, and he kept dragging me up to Gettysburg when I lived in Annapolis. And I finally started, getting interested, and particularly in all the paranormal stuff that goes on there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I read some of the ghosts, the books about ghost sightings and all that. And so I wrote When the Drummer Falls, which is for a young adult audience, and it's about present day, some boys who go out on the battlefield illegally at night to metal detect for souvenirs that they sell. And they just happen to discover that there's more going on in the battlefield than they thought. So, yeah, that's one that, everybody who reads it, same thing, they say that it would make such a great movie, and it would. It was kind of, when I was writing it, I had the Goonies and Stand By Me in mind.
Yeah.
As, the relationships and all that. So, and then there's some nonfiction stuff. And I've got other books that I've written and never really done anything with. And at this point, hopefully someday I will, but I'm not really pushing them right now. So,
okay. Talking with Spencer Kope, author of Collecting the Dead, Whispers of the Dead, and many other books out there that we've just been discussing. So, have you ever had Kopi Luwak coffee?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Is that how you say
it? I never actually looked up how you pronounce that. I found it very interesting, so.
We won't go into details, but it's a coffee that, and poop is involved. Let's put it that way. How about balut or ballot?
No, I haven't tried that either, and I don't think I ever will. So.
I don't even want to describe it, but his character in one of these books decides to sample it, and he didn't like it either. One more question. What is a large group of giraffes called?
What was it? A tower.
A tower.
Yes.
Where did you find that one?
Oh, I include a lot of those in the different books because stuff that I find interesting.
That's right. And what's his name? Steps. He does crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of this stuff comes in. Our guest has been Spencer Kope. It blanked out, but it's still working. And we're talking with the author, of course, of Collecting the Dead, Spencer Kope, Whispers of the Dead. What are the other ones in the series?
So there's Shadows of the Dead, which will be out next August, and then Echoes of the Dead. I'm guessing probably 2 years after that. That's kind of the schedule that they've been on.
So when you're with a big publisher, that's kind of like there's lots of lead time for these things.
Oh, yeah, I didn't expect it. Collecting the Dead, they picked it up in 2014. It didn't come out until 2016. And then I thought that Whispers would come out the next year, but it didn't. It came out 2 years later. So, yeah, there's a lot of, just now I finished the first pass edits, so it's ready to go to the printer, but we're still almost a year out from publication. So, a lot of stuff leading up, and, then they get into the advanced reader copies that they send out for reviews, and then all the publicity and stuff like that. So it's a big process, big difference from the small presses. So.
That's right, and self-publishing, because my wife and I put together a book and had it done and printed in 6 weeks. So.
Yeah.
And on the shelves, and then of course it kind of stayed there, but that's beside the story. One more question for Spencer Dead, one more comment, author of Collecting the Dead and Whispers of the Dead. Is a lot of your stories and the way they're triggered, does it all boil down to the two words, what if? What if this happened? What if that happened? What then would happen?
I don't know. I know that a lot of crime novelists do that. I think I draw more on, there's obviously that what if, because you have to start with that if you're going to, write that. But I'm fortunate in the sense that as a crime analyst, I see a lot of interesting things, and you can take those and change them up a bit and use different elements. And in all my books, there are little tidbits here and there from things that I've actually worked on. So I think I have a slight advantage over some of the authors that are out there writing crime novels. But you start with a what if, but it's amazing how when you're putting a story together, at least for me, I don't know where I come up with some of it. It just materializes. I mean, I have an imagination, fortunately, that just pulls things out of the air. So, and once I get going on something, then just I start, it's like piecing something together. Like I'll come up with a basic concept, and then I'll try out different things on it and see what works best. And usually, what I have mapped out at the beginning, by the time I get done, I mean, it's significantly different. So.
There we go. Our guest has been Spencer Kope. Collecting the Dead, you can look for that now. Whispers of the Dead, you can look for that now. And the other ones in the series are coming out. You can look for them under the author's name, Spencer Kope. And they will be out soon as well. So thank you for tuning in to whatever this show is called, Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.